Gators Breakdown episode 44 is ready to go, and we look into the new coaching hires Florida has made over the weekend. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. Just search on those sites or get the links. And let's see here. Got a little bit of audio issues. So let me figure that out. A little playback there. There we go. Got that fixed. So, as I was mentioning, let's get back to this episode here. Episode 44, we'll look at these new coaching hires. As I mentioned, you can find all the episodes on Twitter at Gators Breakdown and on Facebook. Just search Gators Breakdown and share the show if you like and leave a review. You can leave the comments, and I respond to most of those comments. So let's talk some Gators football out there on those avenues. But as I mentioned, you can find us out there, all those avenues, Twitter, Facebook, all those avenues out there for you. So, as I mentioned, the Gators made 3 hires to fill the openings on the staff. JaJuan Seider, Cory Bell, Brad Davis have been hired by Florida, while no designations have been announced as to what their roles could be on the staff. We know that they fit the mold of the openings Florida had, and even finding a way to fit Cider in. It's been reported that Cider will come from West Virginia. He's a running back coach there, and maybe fill that same capacity here at Florida while Tim Skipper gets moved over to defense and to coach linebackers. Cory Bell will come from South Florida, where he was just hired by Charlie Strong as the defensive backs coach and recruiting coordinator there. He looks to fill the void left by the surprising departure of Torian Gray as he leaves Florida to become the defensive back coach for the NFL Washington Redskins. So good for Torian Gray to get that job. To me, the best DB coach in the nation when he came from Virginia Tech to Florida. About a year ago, almost a year to the day, and he got to come and play with these Tabor and Wilson, and it really improved his stock even more. Of course, the NFL took notice, and he's heading to the NFL, to the Washington Redskins. And the third hire made was a bit surprising as the Gators are bringing in Brad Davis from North Texas. He was the offensive line coach for North Texas this past season and East Carolina before that. So he's made the trip to Gainesville the past 2 seasons. So with those hires, I'm going to give you guys a little history of those guys and what they mean for the Gators moving forward. A couple of those things here you could tell was apparent. Jim McElwain wanted to get guys that could recruit and guys that are young. Bell's in his 40s, while Cider and Davis is in their 30s. Cider is a good mix of both, but Bell and Davis right now are known as better recruiters than coaches. So they'll have to learn on the job a little bit. Not so much Bell. He's been around. I'll get into his history, but he's, I think first and foremost was hired for recruiting, again, in that South Florida area that's so important for the Gators. And Davis, as I mentioned, was kind of a surprise hire. I'll dive into him and see what he brings to the table as well. But the hire everyone was waiting for, the hire that was an A-plus move from Jim McElwain, was the hiring of JaJuan Seider. McElwain announced this past Friday that Seider will be joining the Florida coaching staff as an assistant. Seider spent has spent the last 4 years at West Virginia as the Mountaineers running backs coach. So when FloridaGators.com had, of course, the official website of the Gators has a good background on these guys, and I'll sit there and share that with you. Seider is a native of Belglade, former standout quarterback at Glade Central High School. Seider has a great deal of head coaching experience in his home state, or high school coaching experience in his home state. Served as quarterbacks coach at Lake Worth High from 2006 to 2008, where he coached U.S. Elite 11 and U.S. Army All-American game selection quarterback Star Jackson in 2007. Seider was also the offensive coordinator at Palm Beach Lakes High from 2003 to 2005, where he helped that team to a Class 6A regional finals in 2003, 2004, while coaching 3 players who earned first-team All-State honors. He was also a member of the coaching staff at Glade Central High from 2001 to 2002, where he works with the running backs. So the past 4 years, what we've known him for at West Virginia, he tutored Wendell Smallwood, who was a Big 12 rushing champion in 2015. With 1,519 yards. Smallwood was an all Big 12 second team selection and a 5th round NFL selection of the Eagles a year ago. In 2014, he coached the West Virginia offense that ranked 9th nationally in passing offense, number 11 in first downs on offense, number 12 in total offense, and number 34 in scoring offense. So good history, a good rapport of high octane offenses from under Dana Holgorsen there at West Virginia. Back if you go back to 2013, Seider recruited a Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back Charles Sims, who transferred to West Virginia for his final season in college after he spent 4 years at Houston. During that season, Sims rushed for 1,095 yards on 208 carries, so he averaged over 5 yards a carry at 5.3 and 11 touchdowns while catching 45 passes, 401 yards, and 3 touchdowns. He was named All Big 12 while adding the honor of Big 12 Offensive Newcomer of the Year. Sims was then selected in the 3rd round of the NFL Draft. So let's go back to this past season for the Mountaineers and what Seider brought to the table there. Ranked 25th in the country in rushing offense, 5th in the Big 12 at 228 yards per game. And when you think West Virginia, you think high octane passing all over the field. They were also able to run the ball with Seider. So good hire, I think, for the Gators there. He had a couple stints at West Virginia. He left Marshall to go back to West Virginia in 2013, but during his time at Marshall, he coached running backs, organized recruiting territories, and developed recruiting strategies. That's kind of probably where he cut his teeth, where he got to learn. And he's just known as a diehard on the recruiting trail, and that's what Florida's getting in him here. So if you go back to his time at Marshall, that's where he probably learned to put that to those abilities in motion and become one of the best. I mean, so this is an A+ hire for Florida. So if you go back to those Marshall days, and he was 2 of his top recruits there, Rakeem Cato. If you follow college football, you remember that name. He was 2012 Conference USA Player of the Year. And running back Kevin Grooms, and 3 of his freshman backs back at Marshall averaged more than 5 yards a carry in 2012. And the offense itself finished 6th nationally in total offense. But as I mentioned, this was a move first and foremost to put buzz in Florida recruiting. After signing day, we were running high with this Florida recruiting, and now with the addition of Seider, it gets you even more excited. And then it's a gigantic get for Jim McElwain and company. Recruiting hasn't been what it's supposed to be at Florida. Florida, we just by throwing its name out there. Yes, times have changed, but with what Florida can recruit, the players Florida can recruit, it should be easy. Not necessarily easy, but you shouldn't have as hard as a time as Florida has had recruiting in the past few seasons. So Florida's always should have one of the nation's best classes, and that's what they're bringing Seider in for. He was able to get guys to go all the way from South Florida to West Virginia. Now he'll have that Gator logo on his chest, and being able to do it in the home state. He'll recruit South Florida with the best of them. He's going to be one of the top recruiters heading in there year after year, day after day, getting guys to come to Florida. And I'll tell you what, this was a masterful move by Jim McElwain to get him. It's a move that could have happened before now. Some personal family issues with Seider kept him at West Virginia. But this was a move Florida's been looking to make for a couple of seasons now. The players love him. If you go back to his times at West Virginia, if you ask around and look at that, and he's a really good coach. It's not just for recruiting. He's a good coach too, as I gave you some of those numbers there. But it does seem like, the players will run through a wall for him. So high school relations, of course, I mentioned down in South Florida, you got Dwyer, Lakeland, Miami Central, Miami Southridge, Booker T, St. Thomas Aquinas, Glade Central, Palm Beach Gardens, American Heritage, Deerfield Beach. Apparently the coaches there love him. He's got a good reputation down there. He's in with those powerhouses. Now with that Gator logo on his chest, I'm telling you, it's going to be much easier for him to recruit, and he was already pretty good at it anyway, and for Florida to get some more players down there from that South Florida area that Florida's just been losing out on the elite guys down there. This puts them in the mix with FSU, Alabama right now. Until this is what this hire was made for, was to put Florida in the mix with Florida State and Alabama to get the elite guys. And it hurts Miami even more. We saw this past recruiting cycle, what Florida was able to do already with Randy Shannon and leading the charge down there in South Florida and being able to pull most of those guys that they wanted from the South Florida area into Gainesville. Seider will more than likely be leading the charge now with Randy Shannon getting defensive coordinator position. Seider, and I'm also thinking what this position means for Seider with Randy Shannon being defensive coordinator. Since the designation hasn't been made yet, if he's going to be running backs coach, I expect him to be running backs coach. And just a hint for me, this is just my opinion, he should be named recruiting coordinator as well. So, Seider grew up in the Muck area. We know how Florida has had recruiting success in the past in the Muck, Gator country, if you want to call it that. He's been wanting to come to Florida. This has been one of the moves he's wanted to make his whole career. So he's going to put his heart and soul into this move. He wanted to be a Gator on the sidelines, and this is exactly what he got. He got what he wanted. So now we know he'll want to stick it to Miami. And, of course, he'll want to stick it to FSU as well. As I mentioned, he's going to bring some knowledge from Dana Holgorsen and that offense and maybe bring some ideas to help this Florida offense, turn the page with new quarterbacks, Felipe Franks, Kyle Trask, however you want to break those guys up. Doug Nussmeier, Jim McElwain, they're going into a big season where this offense has to take off. Seider brings a different viewpoint, a successful offense, and maybe he can throw some of his input on this offense and make this offense turn the page. And as I mentioned, the number one reason they brought him in, South Florida recruiting, 24/7 in 2015, King of Paradise recruiter for South Florida, recruiter of the year was Seider. So that's getting guys to go up to West Virginia from South Florida, as I mentioned before. So now the rapport is already there. Seider is a home run A+ hire for Jim McElwain. So with the release on Friday of Seider getting inked with the Gators, here's what head coach Jim McElwain had to say. We are excited to have JaJuan in the Gator family. A lot has talked about his ability to recruit, but he is more than that. He is a great coach as well. Recruiting is about relationships, and he does a great job of connecting and relating to players, not only while he's recruiting them, but while they are playing for him and well after their playing days are over. And Jawan Cider had to say, I've always had an affinity for this university, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to join the Florida Gators family. I look forward to Coach Mack and his staff. I can't wait to meet the players, spend time with them, and help them achieve their goals. So there you go. That is the hire of JaJuan Seider for the Gators. As I mentioned, they couldn't have gotten a better hire for the position of the opening position that Florida had, making it happen. More than likely, Tim Skipper moves to defense. Seider comes in, running backs coach. As I mentioned, should be recruiting coordinator, in my opinion, and the Gators will move forward from there. So the next hire that I'm going to sit here and talk about is Cory Bell. Somebody saw this coming many saw this coming when Gray, Torian Gray didn't come back to Florida as he's going to leave and go to the NFL. This was one of the first names that was brought up that was going to be the hire there. Bell has ties with, and this is from FloridaGators.com as well, so a little bit of history on him. Bell has ties to the current Gators coaching staff, as it runs pretty deep. He was University of Miami's director of football operations from 2007 to 2010. So if you remember that, Randy Shannon was head coach those years at Miami. In addition, Bell was a 2-year varsity letterman and starting quarterback at South Carolina, where he played alongside UF defensive line coach Chris Rumpf. So there's a little key stat there, or a key bit of information there. It has some history with Randy Shannon and Chris Rumpf. Bell earned his bachelor's degree in criminal justice from South Carolina in 1995, went on to earn a master's degree in social studies education from Nova Southeastern in 2000. Bell comes to Gainesville after being named South Florida's defensive back coach, as I mentioned earlier, under Charlie Strong, and the recruiting coordinator just less than a month ago. As you remember, Charlie Strong getting a head job at South Florida was one of his biggest hires there. Lane Kiffin was actually going to keep him or tried to keep him at FAU. So that didn't happen. He was there. Bell was on the staff as a defensive back coach the past 2 seasons at Florida Atlantic. So I've been talking to Charlie Partridge, the former FAU head coach, back and forth a little bit, just trying to, gauge interest on the Florida job while Florida had these openings and seeing if there was any connection from Charlie Partridge there. I've got to know Charlie Partridge a little bit, so I reached out to him, one of the first people I was able to, or first person I thought of to get a word on Bell, since Charlie Partridge was able to coach him or be on the same coaching staff with him as Bell was his defensive backs coach. And quote, he is an amazing recruiter and tremendous DB coach. Almost went to South Carolina last year. Great hire by the Gators. He will own Dade County. So much respect there. Let me break down that quote. Amazing recruiter, tremendous DB coach. Okay, we know what Florida's getting there. Almost went to South Carolina last year. So that means Will Muschamp, a guy that we know very well, knows defense, knows defensive backs. Will Muschamp was interested in this guy. To me, that speaks volumes. Yes, we know Will Muschamp was not a successful head coach here at Florida, but we know there's defenses. We know he was able to recruit. We know he knows coaches that probably think the same way he do, that wants to coach like he does. And Will Muschamp was interested in him. So I think, that speaks volume. In the last quote, he will own Dade. So much respect there. Another South Florida recruiter for the Gators who's going to just step in with a rapport with these coaches, with these players, and it's only going to help Florida from here on out. It's really going to help Florida lock up South Florida as much as they can. So back to Bell, he's also made a name for himself as the head coach at American Senior High School from 2011-2013 and Miami Edison Senior High School in 1997 through 2007. During his time at American in Miami-Dade, he led the Patriots to 3 consecutive district championships. In between high school head coaching stints, that's when he was at Miami with Randy Shannon. So there you go. That's what you need to know about Bell. I really think it was a really good hire from Florida. The way it happened and with how fast it happened, Florida knew. I think that's the word of recruiting. Gray leaves right after signing day. Bell's hired the same day of the announcement. Gray leaves. That's just how it happens, folks. So this, I'm sure, has been in the works for a while with it being announced as fast as it was. Florida knew Gray was going to move on, and they went ahead and got their next guy. Now, the next coach, Brad Davis, is a coach I had to do some more digging on to get some thoughts about him. But first, a little background about him. He's no stranger to Gainesville, as I mentioned, past 2 years. I coached at North Texas this past year when they visited the Swamp, East Carolina in 2015, and made a visit to the Swamp during that was his lone season for both staffs. He was last 2 seasons were his only seasons with those programs. He was the offensive line coach for each program. Prior to his season at East Carolina, he played a key role in guiding prolific offenses at James Madison and Portland State. He was James Madison's co-offensive coordinator and line coach during the 2014 season, helping the Dukes go to a 9-4 overall mark in the school's first football championship subdivision, FCS, playoff appearance since 2011 after a third-place finish in the Colonial Athletic Association. Davis and Madison stood 10th nationally in total offense with a 484 yards per game average, 17th in scoring, 35.7 points per game, 21st in both rushing and passing. Before joining James Madison in 2014, Davis spent the previous 5 years at Portland State, serving as run game coordinator, offensive line coach as part of the program's pistol package. Under Davis, the Vikings had 10 players earn all Big Sky Conference records while ranking among the nation's leaders in fewest sacks allowed. So he's also been an offensive line assistant at North Carolina in 2008 and spent 2 years as a grad assistant at Texas A&M. Here's a big thing I think I've learned about as Davis doing some research, and it's not so much as I just read. His coaching history is not that extensive. Even North Texas this past year's offensive line wasn't necessarily impressive. But I'll get more into that. But what I really liked about him, he's been a frequently requested speaker. Davis has delivered presentations at the Nike Coach of the Year Clinic and American Football Coaches Association Convention. He's also served on the AFCA's Public Relations Committee from 2007 to 2010, and he's had motivational articles published in the association's magazine. So, of course, what you can see there is he'll be able to motivate players. It looks like he's a most motivational type of speaker. He'll be able to speak. I mentioned how young he was earlier. He'll be able to relate and speak to these high school recruits and these young players that are coming into college at Florida. I mean, and he'll know what it takes. He'll know how to speak to these guys, and that was, what we slammed Mike Summers for a good bit. While I thought Mike Summers was a good coach, I didn't think he necessarily, his age up there in years didn't necessarily relate to the young guys on the trail, and being able to once they come on campus relate to them. So maybe there was like a disconnect, in practice and meetings to where his message necessarily wasn't getting across. We saw Florida come out time and time again, just not ready to play, no fire on the offensive line. Maybe this is what Jim McElwain was looking at in Davis. It sees him as a coach that maybe can get better, get some more experience, but at least get the guys ready to play. If you go back not too far, I mean, Davis played on was a 2003 graduate of University of Oklahoma. He competed on 2 Big 12 championship teams and a 2000 national championship squad not that long ago. I mean, if you go back and look at coaches, that's not necessarily that long ago for coaches. So, a little bit of recent history, and players know Bob Stoops out there. So a little bit, tiny bit of connections there, if you want to reach a little bit. He was the team's most valuable offensive lineman in 2002 on that as well. So, from what I could tell, it looks like Davis could be an okay coach. Just hasn't had any talent to work with the last couple seasons. From everyone that knows him, they say he will get the best out of the players, as he's a master motivator, as I mentioned, and players love playing for him. He's tough on them, but only in the way that is good for the players. I have to imagine his youthfulness and approach will be a big hit in the Florida locker room. McElwain mentioned, as I mentioned, it was in the post-game bowl press conference after Florida beat Iowa. McElwain mentioned he wanted to get tougher up front. So I'm sure he did his research, found that in Davis. Recruiting, I think, will be a transition for him because history shows he doesn't have the connections in Florida. But if with his way he can speak and his youthfulness, maybe he'll build some relationships that'll take off. He'd go out with some current coaches and they'll get to know him. And with the coaches that are on this Florida staff, the trust will be there. So we'll throw him in the mix and we'll see what happens. And we'll go from there. That's the hires as they are made right now. So what did Jim McElwain have to say when it was announced that these coaches were Gators? Jim McElwain: we are excited to have Cory and Brad join our staff. Cory has played in the SEC and has deep roots in the state of Florida. Brad also has a strong relationship in our recruiting areas and has won championships as a player. Both are good teachers who will help our players be successful on the field and beyond their playing days. Cory Bell had to say, I'm very excited about the opportunity to join the Gator football family and being part of one of the most powerful brands in all of college athletics. I have a lot of respect for Coach Mack, and I am looking forward to working with a great group of players and staff. Can't wait to get Brad Davis. This is what Brad Davis had to say. I can't wait to get to Florida and get right back to work. I can't wait to meet the players, spend time with them, help them achieve their goals. I'm also looking forward to bringing kids in who have values that fit the goals of this championship level program. So there we go. There's new coaches that Florida has hired. And it's 3 new coaches. Some we were on the radar, some were not. And we'll move forward from there. I'm your host, David Waters, here on Gators Breakdown. We'll dive even more into these hires on the next episode of Gators Breakdown with Joey and Bill will join me to give their thoughts on these new hires. And we even have one more detailed look going back to the class of 2017, those signees for the Gators. One last look at those guys. I think plenty more we want to say. We had our signing day show last week. Did very well. Thanks, guys, for listening out there. But there was even more to say. We only dove into a few players and what we thought of them, but there's some more analytics and some more numbers out there. Bill has some more numbers on these coaches as well when we dive into that. So numbers from Bill for the coaching staff and recruiting, and of course Joey's analysis and opinions. We all love that out there. So when we all 3 get together and give our opinions, the feedback has been pretty well from you guys of how we get both sides. Analytical, emotional at times, and we bring that here on Gators Breakdown. And quick, I know we don't talk a lot about basketball here on Gators Breakdown, and I won't necessarily, because it doesn't move the needle that much. But what did move the needle was this Gators win, big win over Kentucky Saturday night. The crowd was electric. The players were electric. Casey Hill probably played his best game as a Gator, and is officially, and I'll give credit to Dan Hicken here in Jacksonville, officially Mike White's program. This was his stamp on the Florida program. His time, his 2 seasons here at Florida. Tell you what, that was exciting to see. That was one of the most fun I've had watching a Gators basketball game in a long time. You know, fist pumping on the threes and hands up in the air. And I tell you what, it was a lot of fun seeing the O-Dome like that, the new look O-Dome. They had that new intro, the 3D graphics on it. And tell you what, they knew it was coming. Game day was there. And as I mentioned, the crowd was ready. The crowd was rolling. Everybody got involved. Everybody from the bench to Barry. I mentioned Casey Hill playing his best game. Kayvon Allen, started slow, got in the groove. And the defense, of course, held Kentucky well below their season average. And I tell you what, it was just good to see Gator basketball at that point again. Of course, moving forward, how did they handle success? Of course, winning 3 games in a row by over 30 points, beating Kentucky by, I think it was 22. So how does this Gator team handle success with Georgia coming up next? A big game for that Gators basketball team and getting hot, very hot at the right time. So that's it for this show. That's it for this Gators Breakdown. Thank you guys for listening. And remember to subscribe. Please share on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. Follow me, David Waters, on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And share all those Gators Breakdown episodes when you listen here at the end of this one. Just click that little share button, I'm sure, wherever you listen to. Share on Twitter, Facebook, to all your Gators friends. I really, really appreciate it. So this is Gators Breakdown, where we took a look at the new coaching hires. And as I mentioned, Joey and Bill will join me. We'll break it down even more here on the next Gators Breakdown.